It must have been a nightmare to play against that man. Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with the 8th video in Bobby Fischer's perfect 11 out of 11 from the 1963-1964 US Championships when Fischer won all his games. Fischer played 8 times in the US Championships and he won them all, the first one at the age of 14 as you can see in this table. The last one in 1966-67, but the one that sticks out is there in red, the 63-64 Championships, when Fischer won all his 11 games and finished 3.5 points ahead of his closest rival. This is the tournament table from that event. We covered Fischer's first 7 rounds in this series. You can find a link to the playlist of that series at the end of this video, and also I will put it up here. In round 8, Fischer had the white pieces against Raymond Weinstein, who finished in 7th place there with 5 out of 11. And what's interesting is that Weinstein did not make any draws. He won 5 games and lost 6. He won as many games as Larry Evans, who finished in 2nd place, but of course he also had 6 defeats. Raymond Weinstein is quite a tragic figure in chess. Let me tell you the story of his life. Weinstein was a New Yorker. He attended Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, where he was 2 grades ahead of Bobby Fischer. I don't think that school exists anymore, but it is a famous school in chess. Weinstein played 5 times in the US Championship, and he was on a team that won the 1960 World Student Team Championships in Leningrad in the Soviet Union. He played on the US team in the 1960 Olympiad in Leipzig in East Germany, and he finished 3rd in the 60-61 US Championships behind Bobby Fischer and Bill Lombardi. That result gained him the International Master title. So far, so good. In 1963, Weinstein graduated from Brooklyn College with a degree in psychology, and he traveled to Amsterdam, the Netherlands, to attend graduate school. By this time, however, he had apparently developed a severe mental illness. He was arrested in Amsterdam for assault. He was deported back to the United States and was detained in a halfway house where he killed his 83-year-old roommate with a razor after an argument. Weinstein was deemed incapable to stand trial and remanded to a psychiatric hospital, where he still lives. He's currently detained at the Kirby Forensic Psychiatric Center on Manhattan's Ward Island in New York. And the American publisher Sam Sloan visited him there in 1996 and told this very sad story to the chess world. The entire 45 minutes was spent with me trying to talk to him, writes Sam Sloan. He did not say even one word while I was sitting with him. I told him that I had watched him defeat Remlinger and Benko. There was no sign of recognition on his face. He stared blankly at me the entire time. Occasionally his eyes drooped a bit and seemed almost to close. Yet he never actually took his eyes off of me. Sam Sloan continues, I recounted all the details of his chess career, details which hardly anybody other than myself would even remember. I also told him that I personally know Kasparov, Karpov, Fischer, Anand, and most of the world's top grandmasters. There was no recognition that he even knew what I was talking about. Yet, I am sure that he did know what I was talking about. There were also long periods of silence. When I could not think of anything else to say, I just sat there for up to 5 minutes, hoping that he would say or do something, anything. Nevertheless, he just sat there, staring at me blankly. And Sloan finishes his article by saying, I find it strange that a human brain of such brilliance could become so twisted as to produce this. A very sad story, which reminds us all of the importance of mental health. And we all know that Bobby Fischer suffered from mental health issues as well. Enough sadness, let's see how these tortured souls play chess. That was something they were very, very good at. Fischer was white, Weinstein was black. It is the 28th of December 1963, and Bobby, as usual, opened with the e-pawn. e5, knight f3, knight c6, and we get the main line of the Ruy Lopez on the board. Bishop was kicked back, knight f6, Fischer castled, and yes, you can take that pawn on e4, but white will get compensation. Let me show you one of the main lines. This was not played, but here the main line is d4 after black has taken on e4. That pawn also gets taken, then rook e1, the knight on e4 is pinned. Then black plays d5, knight takes d4, and bishop d6. That knight gets taken, and then one of the main line is bishop takes h2 check. Quite a spectacular line. You have to know your theory when you play this Ruy Lopez opening, a very complicated opening. Where were we? We were at move 5. Fischer had just castled. This pawn is unprotected and can be taken, but Weinstein did not take it. He played bishop e7, developing. Rook e1, now the pawn on e4 is protected. b5, bishop back, and here, if black castles and white plays c3, then there is d7, d5 as an option, the famous Marshall attack. But after bishop b3, Weinstein chose d6, pushing that pawn only one square. Fischer played c3, he wants to build a mighty center with d4. Weinstein put his king in a corner, h3 to deal with a possible bishop g4, that pin can be annoying. Knight a5, threatening to win the bishop pair, so the bishop dropped back, and c5. There comes d4 as planned, and so far the players have played the main line from the closed Ruy Lopez. Only now on move 11 does black not play the main theoretical move, because the main move here, according to my database, is queen c7. But Weinstein took on d4, took in the center. C takes and bishop b7. Here knight b to d2 is a main move, but so is d4, d5, closing the center and blunting that bishop. And Weinstein immediately retreats the bishop to c8. It looks like a bad waste of time playing bishop b7 and taking that move back on the next move. But because of white's last move, the bishop is now biting on granite on b7. So Weinstein is playing it back to another diagonal. With the center being fixed, the loss of time is not such an important factor. Fischer developed a knight, g6 from Weinstein, b4 kicking the knight back, and knight c4 is possible, but Weinstein decides to bring the knight back to b7. a4 from Fischer, putting pressure on the b5 pawn. Bishop d7 defending that pawn. A takes b5, and you can take with the bishop, but then this pawn becomes very weak, so Weinstein decides to take with the pawn. A takes b5. Fischer took on a8. Weinstein took back, and now there are two open files on the board, the a file and the c file, and at the moment black is controlling the a file, and it looks like he can control the c file by putting that rook on c8, while white's heavy pieces are stuck behind their own light pieces. But Fischer finds a nice way to take over the a file. He played rook e1 to e3, bringing over that rook to a3, protected by the bishop, kicking the queen out. Once you see it, it looks logical, but it's not so easy to think of that rook lift to take over the a file. Weinstein played the queen to c8, not waiting for the rook to appear on a3, and played queen c7. Knight b3 and knight h5. Fischer played bishop d3, and white is better here. His minor pieces are better than black's, especially black's knight and his light squared bishop don't make a great impression. Rook c8 from Weinstein, and here Fischer played queen f1, adding more pressure against the pawn on b5. You can also play queen e2 instead, but that is less strong. In some variations it's important to keep the bishop on c1 protected by the queen, so queen f1 was played by Fischer. Knight f6 from black, again taking a move back. This is a way to save the b pawn. If you now take on b5, then there is knight takes e4, that pawn is unprotected. So after knight f6, Fischer played bishop g5, and now he is threatening to win a pawn by taking on f6 and then taking on b5. Weinstein played rook b8, and here Fischer can indeed take on f6. Let's look at that variation. Bishop takes, and then you can win the pawn on b5. Bishop takes, queen takes, knight d8, attacking the queen, and queen a4. And black will get counterplay against the b4 pawn. Still, this is an option for white. Fischer decides not to go for the pawn win. After rook b8, he did not take on f6 and then on b5. He played rook a7, increasing the pressure with every move. It must have been a nightmare to play against that man. The knight is pinned. You can play something like queen c3, trying to play active with your queen, attacking two pieces. But then there is queen b1, and you cannot take the pawn on b4. If you do that, then there is, maybe you want to look for yourself, what is the refutation of queen takes b4? Yes, it is that bishop from g5 coming back to d2 and checkmating the queen. The queen has no squares and will be lost. After rook a7, Weinstein decided not to come to c3 with the queen. He went to d8, unpinning the knight. Queen a1. And did Fischer overlook something? Can black now not just take on d5? Surprising move, but it's a standard combination, because if you now take on e7, then the knight takes back and black has won a pawn. Fischer had not missed it. He had seen it after knight takes d5. He can play e takes d5, and if you then take on g5, knight takes, queen takes, there is rook takes b7. Very nice move, because after rook takes, queen a8 check wins the rook. King g7, queen takes b7. There is still bishop takes a3 with a mate threat on g2, but after bishop f1, this variation is over, and this should be assessed as very good for white. So queen a1 is a fine move. It works tactically, threatening to get the queen in the attack as well. Queen e8 was played by Weinstein, and that is not a good move, but black was already in big trouble. Queen a6, attacking the knight with two pieces, threatening to win that knight, so queen c8. And what now? How to continue from here? Bobby finds a tactical shot using the 6th rank. He takes on e5, exclamation mark. After that knight was taken, the 6th rank has opened up and Fischer wins the piece back with bishop takes f6, bishop takes, and queen takes. White is now a pawn up. Queen c3, attacking two pieces, but Fischer had also anticipated that one. Knight c5 protects the bishop, and after knight takes, b takes, you can take that bishop on d3, but then there is rook takes d7. That bishop is also hanging, threatening checkmate with rook f7 and mate on the next move, and after rook f8 there is c6, and white is easily winning here. This pawn is too strong. So all this after b takes c5 and then taking the bishop. Weinstein saw that he could not take. He saves his own bishop and protects the f7 square at the same time. Fischer saves his bishop, queen takes c5, attacking the rook, winning the pawn back, but white is winning. Rook e7, and white's d-pawn is too strong. Weinstein played b4, and there goes that d-pawn. And if you continue, then there is d7, and now this bishop is checkmated. White is quicker. So after d6, Weinstein played queen b6. He must have been in time trouble, and he makes a mistake in an already lost position, because now there is bishop c4, and that's the last move of the game. Here black resigned. There's a forced checkmate on the board now. Let's have a look at that checkmate. If you play b3, it doesn't really matter what you do. Then there is bishop takes f7 check. If you take that bishop, then queen takes f7 check and mate on g7 or h7. And if after bishop takes f7 check you don't take the bishop but play the king to the only square available, then this is a very nice checkmate move that you don't see that often. The rook protected by the pawn and the queen delivering checkmate. That was another positional masterpiece from Bobby Fischer, crowned off with a nice tactical finish with knight takes e5. He was now on 8 wins out of 8 games, and his opponent in the 9th round would be Donald Byrne. Yes, that Donald Byrne, who was Fischer's opponent when Fischer played the game of the century when he was 13 years old. So we're going to look at the Donald Byrne Bobby Fischer game from round 9 in the next video. And I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.